In this video, I'm going to be talking about a stock that has theoretically infinite upside. And it starts here, right? This is Chicken Genius. He's a quite big influencer last time on YouTube, and now he's more on Twitter, right? So the other day, I saw him talking about this. Look, basically, the amount of companies doing a MicroStrategy move are increasing. So don't fade this move, right? And I kind of faded this move, to be honest. I only started reading about it maybe 5 days later, 6 days later when I saw him tweet a lot, right? So if you're interested, go and drop him a follow. Read what he says, right? Because it's actually very interesting, and sometimes you can get some very good ideas from all these people, right? So what he's saying is essentially he full ported into Meta Planet, right? And then I was like, wait, really? Because I've heard of Meta Planet stock a long time ago, right? So I think I first heard of Meta Planet stock when they were somewhere here, around like, I think somewhere here after they mentioned that they were going to transition to a Bitcoin treasury company, right? Somewhere around here, I think. But I actually kind of faded the move because I was like, you know what? I'm not really interested in all these like Bitcoin treasury companies. So because at that time they were talking about using debt to finance Bitcoin purchases, right? Then I was thinking, what is this? This is sort of like a Ponzi scheme, right? But actually, as I was researching to actually short MicroStrategy stock, you guys are gonna call me a moron or something for that, right? But I had no idea of what was happening with MicroStrategy stock. So actually, before I fully did a deep dive, I had a misconception, right? Actually, I thought these companies were taking on debt to buy Bitcoin, right? Which is I thought it was a very stupid idea, right? Because eventually the Bitcoin price is going to have a correction, right? We don't know whether it'll go to like 150,000 first or 200,000 first, but you know eventually there will be a correction, right? Even somewhere here, right? So that was a misconception I had. And as I researched MicroStrategy stock, I realized actually they were not using debt to finance their purchases of Bitcoin, right? So that was when actually there was like a kind of flip, right? And then when I read deeper and deeper, I discovered this is MicroStrategy's flywheel, right? So basically they issue debt to buy BTC. This is the first thing that they did, which is why I thought it was like kind of stupid, right? Why you issue debt to buy Bitcoin and eventually the Bitcoin price goes down and you have to repay the debt, right? So how are you going to repay the debt? You probably have to either sell your Bitcoin or you're going to take huge losses. Basically, in no scenario did I think taking on debt to buy Bitcoin was a good idea, right? But what I failed to see was actually they only take debt to buy Bitcoin initially, right? And then as the Bitcoin increases, actually the market cap increases, right? And one more thing was that actually after they announced that they are gonna buy Bitcoin with this, their market cap increased actually faster than their net asset value, right? And this is where the arbitrage comes in, right? Because they got so much bigger that they got into indexes and stuff like that. And then they started this strategy, right? Which is why I'm interested now, right? So at this number 4 stage, essentially what they're doing is they're using $1 of their stock to buy 2 or 3 or maybe even $5 of Bitcoin, right? And then you're wondering, how does this happen, right? There's a few reasons. First of all, is because like pension funds and all this, maybe they can buy equities, but they can't buy Bitcoin, but they want Bitcoin exposure, right? So they kind of bid MicroStrategy price up, right? So the second reason is because there's this discrepancy between the stock price and also the underlying Bitcoin, right? We call this MNAV, right? This is actually a term coined by MicroStrategy. So Bitcoin increases, the MicroStrategy market cap increases, the weight in indexes increases, and then this is basically the flywheel, right? So next, MicroStrategy issues more debt to buy BTC. So 4 to 6 is what I'm really interested in, right? Because if you're using debt, it's definitely unsustainable, right? So where does Meta Planet come in? So Meta Planet basically they announced in April 2024 that they are going to convert their company into a crypto treasury strategy, right? And when we take a look at Meta Planet stock, it's done honestly phenomenal, right? I think it's somewhere, let's see here. Even let's say you only caught after the pump is 42, now it's about 1,000, right? So that's a 25x, right? Even after dilution, right? So when we take a look at Meta Planet stock, you can see that it's trading around $410 billion market cap, but this is actually inaccurate because the stock has been halted for like I think 2 days already. I think every time it opens, it's just limit up, right? So the stock is currently trading at 1,025 yen, right? And when I convert it is this is obviously 50% higher than this amount. So when I convert it, it's around 4 billion US dollars, right? And they hold about $825 million worth of Bitcoin. So this translates into a MNAV of 5 times, right? And when you take a look at MicroStrategy, actually their MNAV is about 1 point something times now, right? And you might wonder, is this a bad thing, right? And I'll explain why it's not a bad thing later, right? So basically, now there are three key ingredients, right? One, you have to believe in Bitcoin, right? You have to believe that Bitcoin is here to stay as an asset, right? Doesn't mean you believe that the Bitcoin price is going to go to 300, 500, or 800, or even 1 million, right? So that is not the main point of this. I've never been a big fan of just buying Bitcoin because I felt like you're just it's something like gold, right? You are just holding the same asset and you're hoping the asset appreciates a lot, right? Which the asset itself doesn't really do that much. But when it comes to this basically MicroStrategy playbook, basically what is happening is there is more accumulation of the same asset, right? So you imagine there's a company that is selling their shares to buy up gold, but for some reason someone is paying them more for their shares than the underlying gold, right? So the next question I'm gonna ask is why MetaPlanet, right, instead of MicroStrategy? Because MicroStrategy is this big company, dominant, first person to do this, right? And you assume people have a first mover advantage, right? So first of all, it's this, right? Is that MetaPlanet is a much smaller company, and when you take a look at their BTC holdings, is 7,800, right? And MicroStrategy's Bitcoin holdings are about 500, 600,000 at this point, right? So we can see 100x of MetaPlanet's Bitcoin holdings before they even reach the scale of MicroStrategy. So when you take a look at the next thing is zero bankruptcy risk, right? This is financed almost 100% with equity. And the thing that I really like about MetaPlanet is that they are only selling shares on the green days, right? Because of the way that their equity financing is structured. If you guys are interested in all this, you have to watch like actual podcasts about this, right? Because I don't have enough time to go into the mechanics, right? This is just a brief overview video for you to understand what is this vehicle I'm talking about, right? So this is a vehicle to accumulate Bitcoin, as we know. The next thing is there's a favorable tax treatment for Japanese looking for Bitcoin exposure, right? Because Japanese people, when they buy Bitcoin, like actual Bitcoin, right, on exchanges, because of Mt. Gox and all that, is very difficult. First of all, to sign up and all that. I heard that they say you need to like send like physical mail and all of that, right? And the next thing is that the tax treatment is very unfavorable, right? It's taxed at ordinary income instead of capital gains, right? But when you buy MetaPlanet stock and you sell MetaPlanet stock, it's actually capital gains, right? So the next thing is high MNAV. This might look like a bad thing at first glance, right? Because you're like 5 times market cap to NAV, right? So that might seem like a bad thing, but it's a good thing because you are essentially selling $1 and buying $5 of Bitcoin, right? So there's less dilution as compared to if you're selling $1 to buy $2 worth of Bitcoin, right? If you're enjoying the video so far, do help me smash up the like button, hit subscribe, and also hit the bell button. This will help out the channel immensely, and I thank you very much. So next, let's take a look at the bullish scenario, and then we'll take a look at the bearish scenario, right? Which is actually, to me, the most important, right? So the first bullish scenario is that Bitcoin treads water or slowly goes up for the next few months, right? So my thoughts is that all-time high is still likely when you take a look at the Bitcoin price. So I think the all-time highs are still incredibly likely, right? Because you see, currently we are pushing the all-time high. We're constantly testing it. When there's no more bears here, I think we're going to see all-time highs, right? So how high, I don't know. Maybe it can be 150, 120. It depends, right? So the next thing is they can accumulate 100 to 200,000 Bitcoin by the end of this cycle. Because what you have to understand is when the music stops and Bitcoin goes down, right? The market cap to NAV will drastically shrink, right? Maybe even to 1 or maybe to 0 point something, right? And that is when they can no longer deploy this strategy, right? And I would argue if it's like 1.2 or 1.3, you might not even want to do this strategy anymore, right? Maybe what will happen is like what happened with MicroStrategy, where they either take debt to buy more Bitcoin or they pause this kind of capital efficiency program for a while, right? Until the markets allow them to do it again. So the next thing is price to market cap NAV expense, right? I wouldn't bet on this scenario, right? Because I think it's more likely the opposite will happen, right? As these companies get bigger and bigger, I think it's more likely that the NAV multiple will go lower and lower, right? Because that's less capital once again. So the next thing is risk, right? Risk is the most important, right? And then after that, I'm gonna tell you my strategy. So next, let's take a look at the risk, and then I'll walk you through my strategy, right? When we take a look at the risk, the one risk is that Bitcoin has topped out, right? This is not a very likely scenario in my mind, but who knows what will happen, right, with the price. So the next thing is price to NAV starts declining. And this is all reflexivity, right? If you read George Soros' book on reflexivity, this is why all this is happening, right? Because one thing leads to the next thing, and the next thing leads to the next thing, right? So the next is some kind of recession or credit shock, which I think is incredibly likely, right, in the next 1-2 years. So if this happens, definitely this will happen, that the price to NAV starts to decline a lot, and then they may not be able to run this strategy anymore. The next is inability to raise capital due to regulatory / market liquidity, right? Which is actually market liquidity is something to do with this. The next thing is market saturation when too many players use this strategy. We're seeing now a lot of companies that are coming out and say, oh, we're going to run a Bitcoin strategy. Because once you run a Bitcoin strategy, your stock instantly goes bonkers, maybe up to 100%. And that allows you to raise capital from the markets, right? Because obviously currently, if once you announce this and your stock goes 200%, right, there is obvious signs that there is either people trading it, or there are people that are want exposure so badly, right, they are willing to bid up the price up because they see this strategy as well, right? So the last risk is something that I don't see a lot of people talk about, is that the CEO runs away with all the Bitcoin, or the company treasury gets hacked, right? So this is where you can see the stock price go up, and one day it just boom, it just goes to zero, right? And that might be a very scary prospect in people's minds. I think you have to take a look at the risk and reward, and then you decide whether it's worth the reward or not. Obviously, I don't think the CEO running away with all the BTC is a very likely scenario right now, right? But what happens when they have like 50 billion, 100 billion, and it's all inside a thumb drive, right? So I think at that point, maybe we have to like be wary that this is one of the risks. But I don't think this is a very likely risk, right? Don't let me think about this risk and scare you out of this ideas, right? Because I don't think this is a very likely risk, because of a simple fact that if you have 100 billion, your company is probably worth 200 billion. Why would you like pull it out and just like destroy your company, right? Where else you have stock in the company that you can sell. Maybe you have 10 billion worth of stock, you can just sell little by little, right? And at that point, if you have 10 billion, do you really need the 100 billion and become a fugitive or something like that? I think you'd rather have a 10 billion and have a good night's sleep. So the last thing is my strategy, right? So my strategy is to buy an initial position that you are willing to 2x if it goes down 50%, right? So let's say the other day I was just starting to buy, and I bought around 630, and then I bought 700, and then I bought 800, right? So currently the price is already 1000, right? Which I do apologize because I've been very busy trying to understand this, and I didn't want to like come out with a premature video, right? And turns out if I came out with a premature video, you guys are almost going to double your money now. But I think if I didn't have the conviction, I wouldn't be able to buy as much as I did, and I certainly wouldn't be able to present as I am presenting now, right? So I can tell you that my cost price is around, I think, 730, which is currently about 40% up in the past, like, I think 1.5 weeks, right? So I think that's a very, very insane performance, honestly speaking. And sometimes I wonder whether this is all sustainable, right? But as I mentioned, right, theoretically it's an infinite upside, right? So that's why I was perfectly willing to buy 630, 700, and 800, right? Because if someone took a look at this and they didn't understand the fundamentals, right, they would say it already went from 300 to 600 in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks. You're still buying? Are you crazy or something like that? And that is what happens when you don't understand the fundamentals, right? So the second thing is to negate all this risk, right? When the stock goes up like 3 to 4x, right, I think I will take out my initial capital and basically have a free position. And this is basically you telling yourself that you know, I know theoretically it can go up, right? Infinite, right? But if you take out your initial capital and it goes to zero, it doesn't feel as bad as if you leave all your capital in just banking. It keeps going up and up and up, right? Because as I mentioned, right, these two things are incredibly likely to happen, right? Sorry, these three things are incredibly likely to happen within the next 2 years, right? So if we have like a 1 year and it goes up to like a $50 billion market cap, will you not want to take at least some profits? So if and when this kind of recessions happen, you have some dry powder to deploy back, maybe even into the same stock, right? So the last thing I want people to understand before they FOMO and go all in their portfolio, as I mentioned, right, Ken from Chicken Genius Singapore, he went all in into his portfolio, right? So obviously he's a lot smarter than I am, I think, because he figured all these things out early. He figured Tesla out early. So I think he did have a lot of zeros in like crypto, right? Because he looks for this like astronomical upside things, right? I think I'm not comfortable putting 100% of my portfolio in because if I lose everything, what am I going to do, right? And as I mentioned, right, I have to be willing to 2x if it goes down 50%, right? But I put about 10%. Actually, I wanted to put 20% of my portfolio in this stock. But what ended up happening is the stock just went up and up and up, and I was actually just market buying here, right? This stock actually you cannot limit buy, right? When you limit buy, for some reason your orders don't get filled, right? So I just market bid it, somewhere from 6:30. So I bought total in like about 5 days my whole position now, and I'm not planning to add to my position anymore unless it goes from 1000 back to 500. Then I'll be willing to add, right? But at this point doesn't look incredibly likely. So that is how I'm going to play this and how I'm going to make sure it's low risk, right? Because if you see something like this, right, where it's going absolutely parabolic, right, and that it's not tied to fundamentals because it's tied to what is happening in the market, right, rather than the fundamentals, right? Because the fundamentals are theoretically it can go infinite. So I normally don't build up positions so fast, right? But when I saw this and I really understood what they're doing here, I can now understand that this has actually 10x or 100x upside potential before this cycle even ends, right? So if Bitcoin continues to tread water and they can accumulate Bitcoin really quickly, right? Who's to say that they cannot get to 100,000 Bitcoin at the end of the cycle? And at 100,000, let's say 100,000, and let's say Bitcoin will top out at 150,000. This is a 15 billion, right? So 15 billion times at that time I would say 3 NAV. So this is still 45 billion, right? And this is, I would say, within this year, right? So if it happens 45 billion within this year, it's still almost a 10x from here, right? So with the dilution, I would think it's a 6 to 7 or maybe an 8x, right? So yeah, that's about all I wanted to share today. If you did enjoy the video, do help me smash up the like button, hit subscribe, and also hit the bell button. With that being said, have a fantastic day ahead and peace out.